warfare is giving you two choices. On one hand, drones. On the other hand, become a tunnel rat. Subterranean warfare is the game changer. Ukraine is already using this in small cases using bunkers as well as trench lines with overhead concealment, and the Russians are using it for offensive actions such as using the pipelines underneath Kursk and Avdiivka and Bakhmut in order to get behind the lines unseen, and they're able to conduct raids behind the Ukrainian lines. So today we're going to take a look at how is this useful, how can we incorporate some of these lessons learned into Ukraine. Concealment from the air. Drones are the #1 threat. Everybody knows this. The thing that tunnels and underground networks give you is that it hides troop movement, it hides vehicle movement. Yes, you could drive vehicles through some of these tunnels, which makes it so that the logistics, which is constantly being hit by fiber optic drones 20 kilometers behind the lines, so supplies and logistics can be transported underground. That's how we did in Iraq. And that's all because we do not have aerial surveillance on us, which just completely overwhelms everybody that's in Ukraine right now. From above, the tunnels can be visible. You can see the air vents come out of it. You can see the disturbed ground. But beyond the tunnel entrance, it's very difficult to find out which route you took, which forces the attackers to rely on less precise sensors or risk engaging unknown targets, just hitting a random field. And obviously it gives you protection from the most lethal killer, which is shrapnel from bombs, either dropped from drones or from artillery and indirect fire. And overall, they're gonna reduce the effectiveness of these FPVs. And I've seen arguments from both sides. Why don't you just fly an FPV into the tunnel? Well, I'll tell you what, the one thing that seems to stop all drones is a net. If you put a net or a blast door inside your tunnels, which is very common, this is what we do in Iraq, it's gonna stop any drone that tries to come in. The tunnels a lot of times are less than the width of this FPV drone. So flying this guy in there is not gonna be very easy. Ground drones, why don't you just a net, some sandbags on the bottom? It can be stopped very, very easily. You can destroy the entrances, but you can't destroy the occupants inside, deep inside the tunnel that zigzags. In Iraq, we used the networks of tunnels that we had to go and travel to and from different positions, to go reinforce positions or get out because it's dangerous. We would also use it for logistics. If we need to go and have years of water, years of food, canned food, and ammunition inside the safety of a tunnel, well, we did it. We had rations stored away in each of the complexes that could sustain us for years. The only way to safely get all the logistics inside of our bunker complex was through the tunnel, and that's what I'm saying. Look, I'm not saying that this is super easy to do. Digging is hard work. It takes a lot of machinery, it takes a lot of manpower, it takes a lot of death as well. There's cave-in, there's all sorts of different dangers, including being in an active war where there's ISR looking at you as you're digging these tunnel systems. It can be very difficult and it can be very time-consuming as well. So this is best if you are not in an active conflict and you are going to be in the defensive role. North Korea has a lot of tunnel systems that go underneath the DMZ and into Korean towns, and they're primed to detonate behind the lines of the South Koreans so that when there's a war that happens, you blow up the entrance and you flood troops in. And that's another thing that tunnels give you is surprise. In Ukraine, we have bunkers that pocket all across the front line. That's very commonplace. We are already using subterranean structures, but to have them connected by tunnels could give you the chance to give logistics to the guys forward of you. It could give you a chance to evacuate casualties without being struck by drones. It could give you the ability to conduct defensive actions because you don't have to get a company-sized element to the front line, which will most certainly be killed and struck by artillery. You can safely get them inside the tunnel right at the entrance and flood them across. That's how Hamas does a lot of their actions, even to this day. You know, a lot of people say, oh, just bomb all the entrances, tunnels, it's a guerrilla warfare thing. Well, we're living in asymmetric warfare, whether you know it or not. This is asymmetry. War has changed. So whether it's gonna work in Ukraine right now or not, I'm just saying in general, tunnels are super useful, and we're already seeing bits and pieces of that today. One thing I noticed when I was in Ukraine was that our bunker was constantly getting hit. But one thing I noticed in Iraq was that they didn't know where we were. Our complex was kilometers long, and they didn't know at any specific point where we were inside that network. So they weren't able to go and strike us and kill us. They struck our entrances all the time. They struck the vehicles that would come up and give us resupply, but they did not kill any of us while we were there inside the tunnels. Outside, yeah, they would strike us all the time. Inside, not at all. So these tunnel systems give you the ability to hide within the network anywhere, which makes it so that the missions of most people in Ukraine, which are constantly suppressed by artillery, there's a lot of times where we're just in the bunker getting suppressed by artillery. We just have to sit there. Oh man, when is it gonna stop? You know, 10 minutes later, okay, I think it's good. That is not how it is in tunnels. You have thousands of entrances that you go to go operate your drone in order to operate your mortar. And you have the mobility to hide within any stretch of this tunnel system to wait out the bombardment. And then you say, oh, well, what if they use artillery? They're gonna cave in the top of the tunnel and you're gonna get caved in. It's gonna suck. No, bunkers survive. Our tunnels were probably about 5 times deeper than the regular bunkers that we have in Ukraine. It's a normal place to have about 2 layers of logs, a little bit of dirt on top, and a tarp to go and protect against rain. And that's your overhead protection on the front line in Ukraine. And we survive. You're not gonna get caved in. It's gonna be very rare. Even if it does collapse 2 sides of you, Well, you have plenty of people in that tunnel system that can dig you out. That was the plan. And if you have blast doors pocketed every 100 meters inside the system, it's going to protect you even more. And I think people have this misconception that this has never been done in war. Like, you know, he's just talking, who's going to actually go to the front line and mine and dig these positions? World War I is often compared to Ukraine because of the artillery, because of the trench systems, not so much because of the drones, but my thought process is to dig the tunnels to prevent us from getting killed by drones. In World War I, sapper work was a very normal thing. Sappers, for a couple months, would dig tunnels from the friendly trench system down underneath to the adversary's position, put a bunch of TNT in the back, run back, blow it up, commence an assault, and this was successful on multiple occasions. The Battle of Messines Ridge was largely successful because of this tunnel network that they dug. Under fire, they were able to get it done. Hawthorne Ridge and Lochnagar Mine. At the beginning of the Battle of the Somme, that was the first thing that happened, was the initiation by a tunnel bomb. I know what you're thinking. You need a lot of machinery. I mean, somewhat, but it's not that bad. People dig positions in Ukraine all the time. 2 kilometers, 4 kilometers from the front line, it's commonplace. That's what we do. We go to the front line, we take a little bit of artillery, we got some drones, we shoot them down, and we just continue digging. It's fairly simple, especially for infantrymen. We're used to digging. Why not just dig a tunnel system down a little bit more and connect it to another trench? It's gonna take some months, and you probably wanna go and do this about 10 kilometers from the front line, maybe 15, just to stay ahead of the curve. And you don't have to be completely suppressed while you're doing this, but I don't know. Look, I'm no strategician. I'm not that guy. But I've lived in these things, and I know what they can do for you as a soldier with the drone threat. That is why we were driven to the tunnels in the first place in Iraq, was because of the Turkish Bayraktars.
Man, I don't know if that thing's high up or where it is, you know? Oh, I see it.
These things are much more credible than these little FPV bombers that you can make. They have the thermal cameras, they have everything. Thermal doesn't work against tunnels. Yeah, they can see some air vents, but they've done direct JDAM strikes on the position I was at. Nobody was killed. The worst injury we had was a concussion, but that was because one of the guys was at the entrance when they struck the entrance from a JDAM, which is much more accurate than a cab or a fab. And as I said earlier, you have operational surprise. The ability to appear or reappear at unexpected surface entrances changes the enemy planning. Defenders must guard more potential approaches, and attackers must search more thoroughly. How many times did the Russians use these underground pipelines to get behind the lines, and the Ukrainians were surprised? Now, I'm not saying that against the Ukrainians, I'm saying that in the case for tunnel warfare, using these tunnels, whether it's pre-made or made, is beneficial. Yeah, they should have had ventilation or some oxygen or, you know, some other things in order to get through there safer without getting, you know, lung poisoning. But we had that in Iraq. I don't know why they didn't do that. We had oxygen tanks, we had gas masks, we had everything you could have. I'm here alive today. I don't have lung cancer, not yet. And Ukraine already knows this is a huge threat. In Kupiansk, they actually put concertina wire and sandbags and mines at the entrance of one of the pipes that the Russians wanted to use because they know its potential to completely disrupt the defensive lines of the Ukrainians. Distributed redundancy. Having all the logistics, whether it's food, water, ammunition, all piled inside one bunker is very dangerous. It's very dangerous. If that bunker goes away, you're out of ammo. You're out of water and food. What tunnels give you is the ability to disperse all these logistics, which I kind of said earlier, but think about that potential impact that would have on operations. No more huge ammo depots blown up. It also adds on to defense in depth because the Russians push over part of your tunnel section. Well, you can come from behind and then attack it. Yeah, they're surrounded now. They had no idea this was possible. Not to mention that if they do find the entrance, the very start of that tunnel system, who's going to be the first one in? Who wants to be the attacker inside a tunnel system? I will tell you one thing. It is the easiest thing to defend tunnel systems from the adversary. We all know Israel has an incredible military, but they have not yet been able to find all the entrances of Hamas. Even a week ago, I saw another raid from Hamas where 12 fighters came out of the tunnel network, conducted a raid, and then ran back in. Again, this was a week ago. Think about it for a second. If you walk into that tunnel, if there's one guard with an AK that's 100 meters down, he's gonna hear you. Everything echoes down the tunnels. You can hear footsteps 100 meters away. You can hear people breathing or panting or yelling. And all you gotta do at that point is put your rifle out, shoot down the tunnel. And it's even easier than trench warfare because the rounds a lot of times ricochet off the rock walls if it's deep enough. So if you hear a suspicious noise, you just blast a couple rounds down there and it's gonna kill or wound anybody that's coming. Think about Mariupol. How were the Mariupol defenders able to defend for months after Mariupol was taken? Well, they were in Azovstal. They were able to withstand bombardments, assaults, grenades, drones. They're able to withstand all of that because it was underground. It was subterranean. They had working medical facilities, they had fuel and water and ammunition, they had everything underneath there for months. Now that is a pre-made one where the Russians already knew exactly where the entrances were, but for tunnels that are not pre-made, you'd have opportunities to make tunnel entrances anywhere you wanted. You think about the Viet Cong, the Taliban, they both won the wars. Why did they win? Was it because they were, vastly superior to the American military? No, it was because they had tunnels and they were able to hide and conduct raids at their timing and their choosing. And then you say, oh, the Taliban, they have mountains. Of course, you've got a mountain above you. Yeah, sure, but Viet Cong, I've been in those tunnels. I've visited them. I've crawled underneath them. It's in the middle of a forest. There's just a couple trees and it's completely flat. And there's B-52 bomb craters right next to these tunnel systems that were used by the guerrillas fighting against the American forces. The Vietnamese won. Yes, they took a lot of casualties, but it was not from the people hiding inside the tunnels. When they're in the tunnels, they had no problem at all. When they came out of the tunnels, that's when they had a problem. But even then, the Americans suffered, it shouldn't be lightly taken. They suffered a lot of casualties. They would roll into places that it seems like there's nobody here, and then a battalion of Viet Cong crawls out of the mountain and slaughters everybody. This is pretty routine in the Vietnam War, and it's something that shouldn't be negated. World War I was done in Europe. It was in the plains, where they were still able to dig tunnels to great effectiveness. Preservation of critical infrastructure, whether it's fuel, vulnerable supplies, specialized equipment, it reduces their vulnerability and preserves their combat power over time for when it really matters. When there's a tank assault coming, you pop out with a javelin, you shoot it, and you go inside, and they have no clue where you are 10 seconds later. Which bend did you take? Where's this tunnel even going? There's another entrance right there. Are they going there? Flexibility to reconfigure defensive geometry. Entrances, exits, internal connections can be used to adapt the defensive layout over time, creating alternate approaches, fallback places, or protected staging areas. You're gonna have to get the dirt out somehow, but what we did in Iraq was we hired some Arab workers for $300 a month, and they'd dig about 2 meters a day with a pickaxe and a couple machinery and power tools. Just 3 of them. It was a 3-man job. Now their job was to go from one entrance to another, digging, until they linked together, okay? There was 2 teams that were connecting together. And all you have to do is just span that over a little bit more, dig out some more for rooms, and you got it made. If they're locking down an entrance, you dig another one. It takes a day, takes 2 days. It's hard work. I'm not gonna sit here and say it's easy work, but I've done it. I know people, I know women. Half the tunnel workers that I was with when I was digging one of the positions, we dug about 20 meters in a month. We had to also dig out the cavern to go and put the KPV that we had inside there. Half the workers that were helping me were women. They were digging just like us. They were hauling wheelbarrows just like us. They were planting the TNT to blow out some of the rocks just like us. And this is with minimal tools. We had to make the TNT ourselves. I had to go and stir it in a pot and then put it inside paper and put a little primer on it. And Ukraine, out of all places, knows how to dig. You think about the Odessa catacombs. That's where I was at the very beginning of the war because we were prepping for a potential invasion of Odessa. And what could we do? We can't hide inside the city. The ships were bombing us at that time. The Moskva. Yeah, you remember that? It was bombing us. It was right off the coast, bombing us. So we would go inside the catacombs and we were getting it prepped. And we were making routes inside these tunnels so that way we knew where we could go if Odessa was to be attacked. The Odessa catacombs are the largest catacombs in the world, 3,500 kilometers long. And I'm not the first one to think of this idea, coming straight from Iraq and then, let's go to the catacombs. That's the easiest answer. The partisans used this. The partisans in World War II, Ukrainian partisans, were fighting against the Nazi occupation by hiding inside these tunnel networks, thousands of them. Would come outside, conduct sabotage work, assassinations, do reconnaissance, and they go back inside the tunnels. Many of them survived for years underneath there, conducting their work till 1944 when the occupation was ended. This is normal throughout history. This is normal even in modern warfare, and I don't think that we should negate it just because it's asymmetric and it's tunnel warfare. Drones can take care of it, but ground drones, FPV drones. Well, Israel has that capability. Turkey has that capability. And I haven't seen it personally, and we all know that Hamas still exists, and they still use the tunnels. Why aren't they finishing the job? Why don't they just do that, yeah? Again, we had gas masks, we had oxygen tanks, we had everything under the sun, but not under the sun, it was inside. We had concrete blast doors that were fit perfectly so that gas can't come in. And I'm not saying everybody should be doing this, but Taiwan, the Taliban, the Japanese World War II, so many people have used tunnels in the past, and they're very effective, very defensible. You can make entrances anywhere. And again, I'm no statistician, but look, I had to say it. As a tunnel rat, I am bound to the tunnels. I am forever a caveman, and I will not shut my mouth about caves. Yeah, that's about it. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys got something from this. I really don't know if you did, but I just want to go and blabber about tunnels again. I do this every once in a while on my channel, and today is no different. So, we'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace. Nice, dude.